All right, this is for, well, actually, the cover image, in fact, Little Red Riding Hood, which is chapter 14, I believe. Hang on, let me just make sure. Story 14, I should say, in this copy of Grimm's Fairy Tales. And despite the fact that Little Red Riding Hood is certainly one of the handful in here that are almost ubiquitous, that they're told so many times in so many different ways that you think you're familiar with it. But by the way, I actually need to wear this later, so you'll probably see me back in a different shirt in the next one. But anyway, with this though, it is actually different. There are actually some key differences that I don't recall being in any version I've seen before. And it does have an impact. I'm just trying to think. Yeah, because a lot of the ones I'd be familiar with, the other stories of it, you don't necessarily have the moral to it. But with this, no, it is a lot clearer. Which is the idea of goodness, innocence, virtue even, because when Red is sent out by her mother to bring cake and wine to the grandmother, and by the way, cake in this case would be bread, would be referring to bread. So it's like how, which is actually false, but the myth of Marie Antoinette saying "let them eat cake," that's not referring to like cake, birthday cake kind of thing. No, it's referring to a type of bread, which is not necessarily very good. Not necessarily what you would always choose to eat, but it is grandma is ill, so she needs something, and it would be a bread, would be a solid thing for her to eat, and then the wine would be safe to drink, mostly water in that probably. But anyway, the mother warns her, stay on the path, walk quietly, and hang on. There were two words there. They were basically just still quietly. Nicely and quietly. Because also, you don't want to trip or anything and break the bottle. So then there's nothing for her grandmother. So she goes off and does this and encounters the wolf. Now, what's interesting is it describes she has no awareness. She is so innocent. She has no awareness of the wolf being a wicked creature. So when the wolf starts talking to her, she just answers, because why wouldn't she? And it is very interesting. She tries to stay on the path, and it's actually like looking down the path, and the wolf tempts her by just talking about how the beautiful flowers are there, the sunbeams, and it seems like you're going to school. You're just focused so much on going there, you're not enjoying anything around you. So she looks up, looks around, and this is successful in tempting her off of the path to then go and pick some flowers. And she keeps like, oh, there's another pretty one. Oh, there's another pretty one. Oh, there's another. So she goes further and further away from the path, giving the wolf time to run to the to Grandma's house to eat her and do the whole dressing up like Grandma. So yeah, and it is even at that point I was already recognizing. Okay, so this is sort of a not exactly, but if you know the Pilgrim's Progress, it's almost like that, where it's like, yes, the road maybe is straight and it might not be straight, but is narrow, should be straight. And she was tempted by this wicked creature, the wolf, who later, when the huntsman finds him, do I find thee here, thou old sinner? I have long sought thee. So it very much does seem to be a moral here of follow the straight, clear path. Don't go off to the other stuff. You know where you're supposed to go. Do that. Don't be tempted by these other things. I'm just trying to think of what would be a better analogy. I mean, it's sort of not exactly, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Well, she went off the road to her destination, to Grandma's house, with the good intentions of collecting these flowers to give to her grandmother. But it still is, she deviated from the road because of the wicked wolf, and that, yeah. So that I think is clearly the moral here is to, like, yes, do these things that you're told to do the ones that are safe, and don't give in to these temptations. Because what ends up happening, the wolf was able to get there, eat Grandma, and then, after the whole what a large mouth he had, the better to devour you with, the wolf eats Red Riding Hood. It's only because the wolf then So satisfied with himself and with having had this meal, lies back in the bed and falls asleep and starts snoring. The huntsman is walking by at this time, and everybody knows Grimm. And it's like, huh, wow, she's snoring really loud. I'll go check on her, see if she needs anything. Goes in there, sees it's the wolf, and is almost ready to shoot and kill it. But then it occurs to him that the wolf might have devoured the grandmother and that she might still be saved. So he did not fire, but took a pair of scissors and began to cut open the stomach of the sleeping wolf. Red is the first one to pop out, but then they do get the grandmother out, who is weakened, but the cake and bottle are still there, bottle of wine, so she's revived with that. And they do the whole thing just like in the previous, with the wolf and the 7 little kids. Put stones in his belly so that when the wolf does wake up and try to run, just falls over and basically just keels over dead from this. So yeah, I mean, you definitely do have the moral element there of don't give in to these temptations. You were told to do this, do that. But there's also, to a certain degree, I think, Red was innocent. She had no concept of a wicked wolf, wicked anything. So that also makes sense for being a fairy tale that would be told to children, because you can protect your children for only so long, you then have to start preparing them. She was not prepared, but now she is, because it then continues. There's a second wolf that, again, she was going to see Grandma, bringing the stuff with her, and encounters a second wolf that does try to be very nice, be very polite to her while walking on the path. But she doesn't pay attention to him and stays on the path and gets to the house. And it's actually weird because apparently the wolf gave up and like stopped watching her, because then she relays this to Grandma, who closes up the house. And then the wolf comes, knocks on the door, and tries to say it's Little Red Riding Hood. It's like, she's right here. She's already arrived. What are you talking about? But they stay quiet. And the wolf tries again and starts going around the house. Eventually gets up on the roof and is figuring, okay, well, eventually Red has to come out. When she does, I'll jump down and eat her. And it is a little interesting because the way it describes it, but the grandmother saw what was in his thoughts. So the grandmother is aware, which again might be, she, because of her age, would be the more prepared of the two. Like Red may not have thought of that, may still be somewhat innocent, but she comes up with this plan, and it's actually a pretty clever one. Yeah, let me just make sure, because it did, yeah. She had made some sausages yesterday, but hadn't yet cooked them, or is just going to reheat them by boiling them. And it's like, yeah, I'm going to start doing that, Red. So, as I do that, take the water, throw it into the trough outside. So eventually, for cooking up the sausage. So eventually the trough is full. But also, she's cooking up sausages. They smell good. So the wolf on the roof is eventually tempted by this and comes down because he's interested in the sausages, but falls into the trough and drowns. So, yeah, and it then Red Riding Hood went joyously home and never did anything to harm anyone. So, yeah, it is showing that she did learn, but also in some ways showing that there was still more for her to learn. So, yeah, it is interesting because it is like a lot more morality play kind of stuff here, a lot more lessons for somebody to learn from reading this version of the story that I'm just going to assume is more or less the original. As original, I mean, yes, it's translated because the Grimms would have been writing in German, but still, as I'm going to assume that this is a true representation of what they had written. It is Grimm's fairy tales. But it's just like I was talking about in the previous one, Red Hot Riding Hood. Tex Avery. To be fair, making a cartoon. It's meant to be entertaining. Some lessons, yeah, but mainly entertaining. But I'm sure I've seen Red Riding Hood stories told other places in other ways. I don't recall the idea of. I was expecting the wolf to separate from Red Riding Hood and then just run ahead because he's faster. Not, I'm just going to tempt her off the road to distract her. I had no idea that was coming. So yeah, it is very interesting to see that because it is, because of other things I've read. Like I said, I've read The Pilgrim's Progress. That's the name of it. And that is actually an interesting book to read, especially if you are a Christian, because it is definitely a Christian story. But even if you're not, I'd still recommend reading it. In part because it is, as I recall, it is the first English novel. Or at least the oldest one to still survive. Not the oldest English story, that would be Beowulf. But that's an epic, that's not a novel. Pilgrim's Progress is a novel. So that whole idea of there being a path here and having to stay to it is very recognizable from that. As well. So yeah, I do think this is actually very much a teaching story about the symbols of staying on the path to your goal to do something good, which is to take care of her grandmother. Her grandmother's sick. She's going there to try to help her. Don't be distracted from that. Keep on the good thing. Well, what about these things? It's like, no, that is not your mission here. That's not your purpose. Go to grandma. That's what you're supposed to do. And the wicked wolf is tempting you away. That's not good. So yeah, it is interesting. And then I do also think that the whole the language here, then just as he was going to fire at him, the huntsman, it occurred to him that the wolf might have devoured the grandmother and that she might still be saved. And just seeing that there, if we are taking the deviation from the road as essentially giving into the temptation of sins, then this is also talking about the huntsman providing a means of redemption, of rescuing them. Now, true, the grandmother is suffering because of Red Riding Hood's weakness, but he is the one saving them, redeeming them even. So it's like, it is interesting there that might also be an element of an element of that interpretation. And I don't doubt there are many other interpretations and many things also that I've not really noticed here. But it's still fairly interesting to actually read the original version. It does make me curious then about other stories, like Snow White and Seven Dwarves, Hansel and Gretel. That one I think I'm actually pretty knowledgeable on what the original is. I could be wrong though. And Sleeping Beauty. Will be interesting to see those, because those are ones where obviously I do know them by other versions, so will be interesting to see how similar they are and if they have in fact been sanitized of some of their original meaning, some of their original purpose. Which, I mean, on the one hand, there's a value to producing entertainment that will be enjoyed by many, even if you do have to do some sanitization. But if you're completely sanitizing a story, so that the morality and such that is supposed to be there is part of the original work, so if you're removing that, like you don't have the aspect of she needs to stay on the road, but just she's going through the forest, as though there's no road there, there's no path there, just she's going through the forest. You are stripping away that concept then. You are so sanitizing that, yes, you are hurting, even removing the original purpose of the story. Also, the notion of she was so innocent she did not recognize any wickedness in the wolf. But then later, because she knows that wolves are wicked, or at least can be, she's like, no, I'm going to stay focused. I'm going to keep on this. Gets there and is safe then. Until the wolf tries to outsmart them, but the grandmother outsmarts him back. I mean, it's like, again, if you strip away her learning, then, yeah, it's again, you're weakening what's going on here. So it is interesting to see these and recognize more so what has and has not been sanitized over the centuries even. But, yeah. And I'm just trying to think about how many other stories there might be that are like that. Now, true, these are fairy tales, which is different. But I'm also just thinking, like, are there many tellings of, say, Romeo and Juliet that don't necessarily have as clear... You know what? Yeah, actually, it has been a long time since I've seen the original West Side Story. I've not seen the remake. I don't care to be honest. I don't remember if there's much about the parents in there, which would potentially be an inappropriate sanitization. I don't remember, though. It's been way too long. The reason why I say that is an aspect of Romeo and Juliet that does kind of recontextualize the story when you realize it, is it's not a story about Romeo and Juliet. It's a story about their parents, about the families. That's why, at the end, it's not their death that is the end. The end is the two fathers outside of the tomb, because they've been called there to see what has happened, that their children are both there and dead. And one of them even remarks about how his wife died of grief from this. So, like, one of them has not only lost a child, I don't remember which one, if this was Romeo's father or Juliet's father, but has also just lost his wife over this. And it was basically the whole, our feud has just cost us the things that we love the most in this world. Why are we fighting? Why is this feud here? That's really what the story is about. It's about getting them to give up that feud, to give up that unnecessary hatred they have for each other. But it is a tragedy because it's told through the two children who have died because of this. That the suffering is not just your enemies, or not just people willing to fight for you. It's people who didn't want any part of it. And you potentially wanted to spare them from it, but both gone. So it's, yeah, I don't remember if the parents are really present in West Side Story. They might be. It's just been way too long since I've seen it. But it's only really on one side of it, but one more recent version of that story is the movie Warm Bodies, which is basically Romeo and Juliet with zombies. Romeo is a zombie, but by finding love with Juliet, his heart starts beating again, so he ceases to be undead. Mostly, at least. It's a little unclear on that. But in any case, you do have her father is basically the leader of the human survivors, and so wants to just kill all the zombies, but has to learn to give that up, to a degree at least. But it does end with a bunch of the zombies, because they found love again, their hearts are beating, so they are not zombie undead. Honestly, I'm not sure if they are, because they already had like rotting flesh and such, so I'm not sure how much it is they are no longer undead, but yeah. But it still is, you do have that aspect of the parents learning. Or at least one parent. I don't really know if zombie parents count. Anyway, I was going to say at some point I may try to do Shakespeare stuff for this. I don't know, though, because it's just, I would have to do it as each separate story. I couldn't do his complete works. That would take way too much time, be far too much commitment. But there are definitely some stories. Like, I do want to go through The Tempest, because what little I know about it, it does seem like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which the classic Disney version of that's one of my favorite movies. Definitely one growing up. I love that movie. But that is a retelling of it. The Black Hole, which is another Disney film, is a retelling of it. That one's a bit more, the Black Hole is a bit more obviously 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, but it still tracks back to The Tempest. But also Forbidden Planet is a telling of The Tempest, to a degree. And it's like, I really want to read the original, because because I have read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, I've seen that movie, I've seen The Black Hole, I've seen Forbidden Planet, and I really enjoy all those. So it'll be interesting to read through The Tempest, to see like what is there that I also enjoy and is carried over versus what was potentially sanitized away. But yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be fun when I get to that. I just have no idea when. That's it. We'll see you next time for The Foundling Bird, which will be a little interesting. And just because this I do remember from years ago, foundling would be like an abandoned child, so an orphan. I'm not sure if it is why this is the word, but it's like foundling because they were found. Like, this is the whole somebody left them on a person's doorstep, or at this era it might have been more so like a church's doorstep. So yeah, but yeah, so The Foundling Bird, don't know, maybe that'll be, no, I don't want to get into speculation about what it might be. We'll just find out next time. See you then.